Okay, so the trial over the OMG dolls in the OMG Girlz is finally over, and T.I. and Tiny lost. This was yesterday afternoon. The jury only took 2 hours to reject the claims after a 10-day trial, and this was the second trial after the judge declared a mistrial back in January after jurors mistakenly heard testimony about cultural misappropriation and companies stealing from black people. That had been barred from being mentioned, but some deposition video testimony got in that shouldn't have. So this was a redo of the trial, and well, I'm here to break it down for you all. I saw a lot of it, and not every day, but most of the main stuff, including Tiny's testimony, T.I.'s testimony, opening statements, closing arguments. I didn't see Zonique's testimony, but I saw Brianna Womack's testimony. I wrote a few articles for my website, which you all should subscribe to, Legal Affairs and Trials with Meghann Cuniff. You can see it right there. The first article is right here, and it looked at the racial issues at play in the case. The last trial erupted into a fight over racism allegations after the mistrial happened. And it was prompted by T.I. and Tiny's lawyer filing a brief that said MGA lawyer Jennifer Keller engaged in racist behavior during the first trial, including saying the N-word when cross-examining Zonique about her song lyrics. This was song lyrics that included that word. She was quoting the word. It got really ugly. I mean, the attorneys were just sniping back and forth in the filings. The filings were kind of hysterical. There was a sanctions request for it, and I just kind of bowed out of following it really after the mistrial, because it was just so vitriolic. And it looks like Judge Selna, the judge on the case, actually kind of felt the same about it, because he was busy with other trials and all the other cases he does. And then when the second trial was about to get going, he finally ruled on the sanctions request and said, it rejected it, said that he wasn't gonna wade into it. And this was the sanctions request from the lawyer whose behavior had been described as racist. She wanted the lawyer who said that to be sanctioned and forced to apologize, and it didn't end up happening, but kind of set the stage for just a really hard trial to cover in terms of how vitriolic it was and how personal it was between the attorneys. I mean, I've known the MGA lawyers for a long time, and they were obviously upset that they thought that I was like taking the side of T.I. They were upset that I was like talking to him in the hallway and that kind of thing. So, as a journalist, I just have to keep doing my job and know that, for them, it's just really, really personal. For me, it's not personal. Just keep doing your job as a veteran judge who's, knows all about this, told me, you're just doing your job and you can't be best friends with everyone. So, but that's kind of just my way of saying this just got to be a hard trial to cover in terms of everything going on with that. But, I just tried to keep it professional and keep writing articles that I thought, appealed to, not only a mainstream audience, but also a legal affairs community audience, and kind of look at the issues going on that I think they would be interested in. And the first story was about just some of the racial issues that were still at play. T.I. and Tiny's lawyer had said really that the group's popularity with black girls was enough to explain MGA's interests. And he had an email, an internal email where somebody in the company says, we need to be careful to protect our non-white OMG base. OMG skews non-white, specifically black. There was a larger context to the consumer numbers there that Isaac Larian explained in his testimony, and he made it clear that the company isn't focused on just one ethnicity when they're manufacturing dolls, that there's all sorts of ethnicities that they're appealing to here. But I mean, the email just kind of highlighted that race was an issue in this trial, just that it was kind of obvious that the OMG girls were appealing to young black girls. A lot of black girls knew it, where maybe it wouldn't be so popular with white girls. But we really didn't see the racial issues that came up in the first trial, because Judge Selna, while he didn't do anything regarding the sanctions motion over the lawyer's behavior being described as racist, he did limit the questions that they could answer or ask about those topics. So the issue with Zonique being questioned about her song lyrics, that didn't happen in the second trial because the judge wouldn't allow it. He issued what was called a order to show cause, saying basically you need to file something saying why I should allow you to pursue these questions and what is its relevancy to this intellectual property and trade dress trial. So MGA got a declaration from one of their doll designers, Laura Stevens, who said she knew about the Harris family and she knew about their TV show and knew of the OMG Girlz but from the TV show, but would never design dolls off them because she doesn't like T.I. because of his background with there was an incident that was on the TV show that kind of showed that he accompanies his older daughter to her gynecology appointments, and then there's the publicity that happened when they got. And then there's the sexual assault investigation from the LA County District Attorney's Office, which was closed, didn't result in charges, but it was pretty widely publicized. And this doll designer had submitted a declaration saying that she knew about that stuff. So because of that, Judge Selna said, obviously there is some relevance here. If she's saying I wouldn't design dolls because of this stuff I knew, he actually held an evidentiary hearing before trial where he determined the scope of the doll designer Laura Stevens' testimony, and he limited it to 15 minutes. He said you can only spend 15 minutes asking about this stuff to MGA's lawyers. So we didn't hear any questions about that when T.I. testified because the lawyer for MGA wasn't allowed to. And we heard requests from her throughout the trial saying that this had, she really wanted to be able to get it in front of the jury and explore T.I.'s background more in front of the jury, but the judge just wouldn't allow it. But I think it was an example of just kind of all the extraneous stuff in the trial that happened, because one thing that the focus on T.I.'s background, although there wasn't much of a focus on it, but the mentioning of T.I.'s background enabled T.I. and Tiny's lawyer, when he was questioning the doll designer about the different creative boards, he was able to point out Little Kim. He said, there's Little Kims with their legs open, and Marilyn Manson in a Nazi helmet, just to kind of show that there's tons of unsavory stuff on these boards. He even said when he was pointing out Little Kim that he wouldn't be pointing this out except for MGA's insistence that they would never model a doll based on T.I. So he brought up Little Kim's convictions for lying to a jury, which it was kind of pointed in how he said that, because it kind of got into what the point of his cross-examination of the doll designer was. He had to basically try to dismantle her credibility, because she was on the stand for 7 hours in direct testimony, going through all these design processes for not every single one of the 31 dolls at issue, but a lot of them, because she had designed a lot of them, and she was completely denying any kind of connection to the OMG Girlz. I mean, she said she didn't even know who the OMG Girlz were, and she had pretty detailed explanations about why she designed the dolls the way she did. And then she had these what's called mood boards showing, her first step in the creative process for these dolls, where she gets just various photos of things that kind of inspire her and what she might want this doll to look like. So that's where we saw the Little Kim and the Marilyn Manson photos. But I mean, there was just a ton of different stuff on there, and you would see the mood boards for the different dolls, and you would see, the split-colored hair that one of the OMG Girlz thinks is modeled off this specific outfit that she wore back in 2016 or something. You would see tons of different photos of tons of different celebrities looking a lot like that. It just really kind of highlighted how ridiculous some of their, ideas that these dolls were directly copying them seemed. And it just didn't seem to be going well for, T.I. and Tiny's team. Like, I thought it was pretty telling that the OMG Girlz actually left the courtroom during this testimony, and I didn't see him come back. And then Tiny was sitting at the table, the her counsel table, for a lot of the testimony. But when the designer got into the Major Lady doll that Garrett's displayed here, that Tiny did a post about asking, does this doll look familiar? And she thinks it's modeled off her because her social media handles, she goes by Major Girl, and she often wears her hair in that kind of orange style. So they thought, with the OMG Girl doll lookalikes, and then Tiny, they thought this was just, too much. It couldn't be a coincidence. But Jennifer Keller even said it in her closing argument. She thought she could just rest her case on the Major Girl, Major Lady doll, because she said it doesn't look like Tiny at all. So Blanche Consardi, who's MGA's former creative director, she's still doing some work for him in a freelance capacity. She really detailed her reasons for creating Major Lady, and she actually just kind of listed the differences between her and Tiny, and she said their hair is different. Miss Harris does not have sunglasses. She's not wearing a cape like the doll. She has on a white dress and sleeves, and the doll has a silver cape. Miss Harris is wearing a white dress, and the doll is wearing a glitter blue, black, and silver jumpsuit. The doll has a belt. She said the name Major Lady is a nod to the 1970s disco era, and also kind of a reference to Major Tom, the David Bowie song about being in space, which is actually, the song's called Space Oddity, and Major Tom is a persona of David Bowie's that's referenced in there. So that seemed like pretty devastating testimony for the OMG girls. So, it was like, how are you going to respond to this? And the cross, I thought he had 30 minutes before the end of the trial day. So obviously Blanche was going to come back the next trial day, and the cross-examination would continue. But Kevel, the T.I. and Tiny's lawyer, had 30 minutes to work with this, and I think I'll be pointing to this in I've done presentations on a reporter's perspective on jury trials, and one of the things I've talked about is the need to, if you have a few minutes with a witness, don't just pass and be like, oh, let's just go home and I'll come back the next day. That's your chance to really go hard on this. And I thought this was a really good example of Kevel doing that, because he really started hitting Blanche on her credibility. But whether it was effective or not, of course, is going to be another side of this, because she broke down crying, and he had questioned her about some metadata involving one of the design documents, which was pretty obviously an attempt of him to question the authenticity of these design documents. He was really trying to imply that, she was lying on the stand, and that she had, even doctored some of these design documents, which is she was so passionate, and she was, maybe some people would think that she was strange or something, but it's also she was the creative director for MGA, and she makes dolls. She one thing that wasn't well conveyed in my articles is what a huge Lady Gaga fan she is. She had some kind of homages to Lady Gaga and how she talks. So, she was definitely not, somebody that you would see working at a Wells Fargo, bank or something. But the idea that the jury would write her off as, she's perjuring herself and this is a big conspiracy, she was, designing documents, I'm just not sure if it worked. And it's what did he really have to work with? And he John Kevel, when he was crossing her, he had some good moments, and it'll kind of go down as one of the more unexpectedly dramatic moments of a trial was when he he said, you testified over and over again that you never took any inspiration from the Harrises. You don't have any photos of the OMG girls or T.I. or Tiny on your mood boards anywhere. And then he's brings up a mood board, and he's like, oh, but what's this right here? And he zooms in, and he's like, oh my gosh, it's T.I. And there's a photo of T.I. on the mood board. So it was kind of a, oh my gosh moment in the courtroom, as he said. And Blanche was just I didn't know who that was. And, she was kind of flustered just because, she'd been on the stand all day, and he was being, Kevel was taking, kind of a harsh tone with her. Because like I said, he needed to try to dismantle her credibility. So, she gets upset after she's she's after it ends, and she walks out of the courtroom, and then she's really upset in the conference room, which I'm sure the jury heard. But it was like, is that going to mean that the jury thinks that, oh, that shows that she's lying? And the interviews with the jury afterwards showed that no, they didn't think that she was lying at all. They thought the doll designer, and she and Laura Stevens were totally credible and just like really passionate creators, and they didn't see any kind of OMG Girlz stuff on their doll design boards, which was the point of the MGA lawyers to respond to the TI questions. They're like, is TI is MGA accused of infringing TI's likeness? No. And it's like, okay, so I mean, why does it matter that she had a photo of him on her mood board? And it seemed to kind of contradict the idea that if it was a conspiracy, and she did know who TI was, and she was making up mood boards, it's like, well, why would they let a mood board slip in with TI's picture on it? Maybe it really was just accidental. Look at all these celebrities she's got all over here. It was just stuff that she thought was cool. And the jury, I heard, I think it was the jury foreman said that, the doll designers were just so passionate and creative, passionate about their creativity that, I had kind of remarked to somebody else who was watching the trial that, that conspiracy, kind of case gets a little dangerous with the jury, because you're really running the risk of, if they don't believe you, you're kind of screwed. And part of the trade dress infringement law allows for it to basically be like inadvertent. Like, you could not know who somebody is, but come up with something, a product that inadvertently infringes on their trade dress. And that was acknowledged in the closing argument, but it definitely wasn't pushed as part of T.I. and Tiny's case. I mean, T.I. and Tiny's case was all about, they knew what they were doing, they're being malicious, and, this is kind of a cover-up conspiracy. So obviously it just didn't work. I mean, the jury was just like done with this case by the last week for sure. I mean, the judge even said something to him about said something to the attorneys about how you're trying the patience of this jury. One major problem, I think, was the damages request. I mean, $100 million is a lot of money, and part of it was, well, they're saying MGA wouldn't open up their books or their detail, their profit details for these dolls and everything. But I think there needed to be a more realistic, accounting of that or request on that. And then also the experts that they had there, or the consumer witnesses. T.I. and Tiny's team had 4 witnesses who said they bought the dolls thinking that they were associated with the OMG Girlz, and that was their evidence of confusion within the market. And I mean, I can see doing that if you also had a survey alongside that showing, a more technical, scientific thing establishing that there was confusion or there's potential for confusion. But that was all they had, was the 4 witnesses, and the witnesses were actually fans of T.I. and Tiny's, who responded to Tiny's post asking about do you see similarities here. So they weren't the most objective witnesses, and there were a couple of them who actually testified. They didn't have the receipts for the dolls, but they knew for sure they had bought these specific dolls in 2021. But then it turned out that the dolls weren't produced until 2022. So John Cavill, the lawyer, in his closing just kind of addressed that, just saying, it's possible to be off by a year or so, which I mean the idea that these people are just perjuring themselves just so they can meet T.I. and Tiny, maybe it's somewhere in between. But in the end, to have those kind of flaws in the witness testimony when that's your only evidence of consumer confusion seemed like a problem. They did have some web pages, like when you go to walmart.com and look up OMG Girlz, you've got the dolls and then the girls at the same time. So they were presenting that to the jury too. But it just seemed like they needed way more evidence of that. But of course, MGA was able to point out that, one reason they might not have done a survey is because they might not get the results that you want to get. And in the, court discovery process, you would have, if you did a survey like that, you would have to release it to the other side. So if it doesn't come back in your favor, it looks pretty bad. And you basically just gave your other side some free evidence to use against you. But, yeah, it should be interesting to see what happens with the attorney fee fight, because Isaac Larian said on the witness stand that he wants, if he won, he wants to ask for attorney fees. And he got that in the Barbie versus Bratz trial that Jennifer Keller was one of the attorneys on. And, that's a famous case in business and law. It went on forever. It was a way bigger case than this, but he ended up getting $137 million fee order against Mattel. They had to pay MGA and Larian's attorney fees, and it was, he appreciates that as a kind of deterrent against these lawsuits that seek to put people under. There was pretty good examples of Kevel trying to counter the things that Larian said by bringing up the Barbie Bratz case, and I thought it was pretty effective or interesting to watch the way he questioned Larian about the Barbie Bratz and his own approach to litigation, because his point was to try to show that the things that Larian criticizes T.I. and Tiny for are kind of common litigation tactics that he's taken in his own cases. But one thing Larian points to that's not a common litigation tactic is in the cease and desist letter. Tiny says, that she was at a Bratz event in Atlanta where T.I. and Tiny live, and had been approached by somebody from MGA about a possible licensing deal between the OMG Girlz to make dolls. And that was in the cease and desist letter. So he said, he knew that was a lie, and that meant it was extortion. And Tiny has said that she can't remember who it was, but she knows she was definitely approached by someone at the event. But in the end, they had to definitely kind of back off on that, because MGA is just adamant that they had nobody at that event or anything like that. So he's able to base his, this is a lie, this is a scam, shakedown, extortion on that, and kind of go from there.
I'm not happy because it wasted a lot of my time, energy, my employee time and energy to deal with an extortion. They knew from the beginning they don't have a case, and they brought it anyways, and they picked on the wrong guy.
John Kevel's cross-examination of Larian did reveal, or Larian did say in testimony, that he didn't actually read the letter when he first got it. It wasn't until later that he found that licensing deal claim and realized it was a lie. So Kevel, emphasized that in his closing argument, that, how could Larian say he knew it was extortion, which is why he didn't respond and instead decided to initiate suit against T.I. and Tiny, actually seeking declaratory relief. Like, how could he justify that by saying, oh, well, it's because they lied, when he also says he didn't even read the letter that, where they supposedly lied. But I just think that stuff was just too in the weeds and kind of too past the real life, here are the dolls, here are the girls, what do you think kind of thing, which is what the case really was all about to the jury. But one issue with Larian's attorney fee request, I think it's unlikely he's going to get everything, because this was just such a exhaustingly over litigated case. And if he did get all his attorney fees covered, it would be like Judge Selna kind of going back and retroactively granting the sanctions motion that he denied, at least in part, because he would be making T.I. and Tiny pay for the attorney fees on those sanctions, on that sanctions motion, which is what the sanctions motion was asking for in part. So I think the request over attorney fees isn't going to be quite as easy as they had with Judge Carter, who was the judge on the Barbie versus Bratz case, because Judge Selna has shown a lot of problems in complaints about MGA's tactics here, and just how aggressive they are in accusing T.I. and Tiny's lawyers of misconduct and that kind of thing. And then just with the the sanctions motions that he didn't grant, is he going to want to approve attorney fees for those, that kind of thing. So it'll be interesting to see how they ask for that and how Judge Selna approaches it, because I do think he's going to get something. The jury was pretty overwhelmingly clear that they were in his favor, but everything that happened in the case, I'm not sure all attorney fees will be covered on that. You know, like I said in the beginning, just the tone of this trial was a little much for me. Just all the personal stuff between the attorneys, them kind of, you know, taking issue with my coverage, that kind of thing. I just got tired of it. So I'm really glad this trial is over, and I hope I gave a good summary for you. I would invite everybody to subscribe to my website. My written articles have a ton of details in there that I didn't talk about. I can't remember everything off the top of my head here as I'm doing these videos, but I just wanted to, you know, make this video as a way of kind of reaching out to maybe a different crowd and just kind of providing a different medium for my reporting to, you know, try to connect and give you guys the breakdown on what happened with that trial. So thank you so much for tuning in. And again, Legal Affairs and Trials with Meghann Cuniff. That's legalaffairsandtrials.com. Subscribe, and your paid subscriptions go a long way to supporting my work. Thank you.